Good morning, viewers. I still remain my humble self, Abiodun Kolabo, the CEO of CATFISH Farm, as you know. We also run a YouTube channel, Cabot Consult. If this is your first time in coming in contact with this channel, I would like you to hit on the subscription button and as well turn on the notification bell so that we keep updating you on matters relating to aquaculture. You see, aquaculture is finding roots and is finding acceptance, especially in Nigeria, because the need for protein is increasing on daily basis. So agriculture and aquaculture, which is a subset of agriculture, is a area that has a promising future, so to say, and as well your return on investment is high. The return on investment in aquaculture is high, very very high, as demand for protein, especially fish protein, is very very high. So what we do basically in this channel is to educate farmers that have been into fish farming and prospective farmers that will want to enter into fish farming. We give them the right guide, the right coach, the right training on this channel so that together we succeed. Yeah, together we succeed. Yeah, today I will continue from the topic I started last week. I was discussing on feed management. We had a good time where we look at feed management part 1. Today will be a continuation of that very topic. Yeah, I was able to talk about in feed management there are 3 key aspects to put your mind into or bring your mind into consideration on. One is the feeding rate, 2 is the feeding frequency, and 3 is the feeding method. These 3 aspects of feed management is encompassing. We were able to talk about feeding rates in our part 1. Yeah, what is that exact quantity of feed your fishes need per day? If you have not watched that video, I want you to hit on your post, go back to our videos, search for feed management part 1, watch it, then come back to part 2 to continue. Yeah, today basically I will be talking about feeding frequency and feeding method. Yeah, you see, feeding frequency is the second thing you put into consideration when you want to manage your feed. What is feeding frequency? Feeding frequency, simply put, is the number of times a fish farmer feeds his or her fish per day. I repeat, is the number of times in a day whereby a fish farmer feed his or her fish. We have best practices of the required amount of times to feed your fish, and which is largely dependent on the first topic we treated in part 1, which is feeding rate. If you don't know the exact quantity of feed to feed your fish per day, I tell you, if you are feeding frequency is twice or thrice, you might be engaging in the wrong practices. You won't be able to manage your feed well. Every animal have an exact quantity of feed to be fed per day. That is the required amount of feed, which is largely dependent on their body weight. We talked about that extensively in part 1. I will advise you, for your good, to go back to the part 1 and watch, like, share, comment. In case you have questions, we are here to give you service for free. Yeah, to continue. Most farmers engage in 2 or 3 feeding frequency per day. It depends on your engagement as the fish farmer. For example, let's say you are working in company A and you have a fish farm, which is another source of income. Yeah, because Nigeria now, with the trend of economy, the situation on ground, you can't rely on one source of income. So you have to have multiple sources of income to be able to meet up with your basic needs. So let's say you are working in company A and you need to report to office, let's say 8:30, and return 4:30 or 5. You see, feeding 3 times might be difficult unless you have workers on your farm. So for that particular farmer, he can choose to split the feeding rates per day into two: morning before he goes to work, and evening, late evening when he returns from work. Okay, another example. A farmer B does not have any other engagement aside the fish farm. He has decided to take his fish farm as his own work, his business, his company, where he devotes more of his time to. So that particular farmer can decide to say, okay, for the feeding rates, I will split it into 3 or more. But 3 is okay. You split it in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. So, however you decided to engage the feeding frequency, it depends on you as a person. But the concept or the idea is that make sure that what you are splitting into 2 or 3 is equal to the feeding rates per day, because this is the amount of feed they need per day to be converted to flesh and for other metabolic activities like swimming and the rest. Of course, some of the feed will be excreted out as waste. So the exact feeding rate is 5% body weight, especially for fingerlings to table size. Please go back to the part 1, watch carefully, ask question, comment, like, and share. Now the third but not the least is the feeding method. Yeah, when we talk about feeding method, having understand the concept of feeding rate, feeding frequency, you need to know the method of feeding, so that all your fish, 90 to 99% of your fish in the pond, will be able to feed on the feed that you administer to them per time, either twice or thrice. Not feeding a particular number of fish within the pond without the others feeding. It will bring about a disparity in their growth rate. There will be sharp difference in their growth. So how do I feed my fish well, so that 90 to 99% of the fish in my pond will be fed per time? We have basically 2 methods of feeding. Number 1 is the broadcast method. As the name implies, is spreading the fish in your pond evenly, so that every fish or fingerlings in the pond will benefit from the feed. By so doing, everyone have the privilege to grow because they feed. We have the second type of feeding is spot feeding. This is a method of feeding in which a farmer chooses 2 or more spots within the pond that he administers the feed. For example, let's say this screen is our pond and we choose a particular corner of the pond to feed our fish. With time, they will be used to that particular spot. It becomes their kitchen or their dining, where they converge. Anytime they perceive that you are around the pond or someone is around the pond, they begin to sense that you have come to feed them. So they converge at their dining table. However, these 2 methods have advantage and disadvantage. The advantage in broadcast is that all of the fish in your pond will be able to benefit from the feed that you have administered. By so doing, their growth rates becomes uniform. So the issue of cannibalism, the issue of sorting frequently will be reduced because you've engaged broadcast method of feeding. Whereas one of the disadvantage of broadcast feeding is that you don't have a close interaction with this fish. You will not be able to figure out easily if there is infection or there is sickness in those fish. so that you begin to take measures, the necessary measures you need to take to curtail an outbreak of disease. That's the major disadvantage of broadcast feeding. It gives you distance with your fish. There is no close interaction with the fish. Unlike spot feeding. In spot feeding, you will be able to have a close interaction with these fish because they gathered towards the spots. You'll be able to observe them as a fish farmer. You'll be able to know if they are feeding well or they are not feeding well. You'll be able to know if there are some that have been injured, probably by cannibalism or disease infestation. So you'll be able to take measures immediately to avoid outbreak of infections or disease. However, the disadvantage of spot feeding is that a lot of those fish will not benefit from that particular feed you have administered. Why? Because there will be the survival, it will be a survival of the fittest. The stronger feed more. You see, when your fish start growing, especially in an adult state, I will advise you do a broadcast feeding, because at that time they have strength and their agitation in the water when you are feeding them they can push one another. So the stronger tend to feed more. That is why when you come to sorting, you discover that some are weighing 1 kg, some are weighing 0.5, and you begin to imagine you've been feeding them together, they've been coexisting together. Why is it that some are growing faster than the other? Is your method of feeding, and by so doing you waste a lot of feed. So I believe you have found value, you've gotten value from this video. These are just the 3 basic ways to manage your feed. Number 1 is feeding rate. Number 2 is feeding frequency. Number 3 is feeding method. If you have find this video interesting, why not hit on the subscription button and the notification bell, so that we keep updating you and you keep helping us to grow as a channel. Our target is that at the end of this year, we are reaching to 10,000 fish farmers across the globe. With your support, with your click, it's going to happen. So support us by clicking on that subscription bell button and the notification bell. Thank you. Stay tuned as we bring you series of topics that will benefit you in your adventure into fish farming. Thank you. I still remain my humble self, Abiodun Kolabo.